This is the oldest temple unearthed anywhere on this planet.
I spent much of the 90s and the late 1980s investigating this issue of a lost civilization. I wrote a series of books about it.
What he discovered was mind-blowing. After discovering the first T-shaped pillar buried at the site, he soon found more of these massive structures.
Everything you've been told about Göbekli Tepe is a lie. Not an exaggeration, not a simplification, a lie. For 30 years, archaeologists told us that primitive hunter-gatherers with stone tools somehow built the world's first temple in 9,600 BCE. That religion came before farming, that this site was the spark that ignited human civilization. It was a beautiful story. It made perfect sense. And a 2025 study just proved it was complete fiction. What researchers actually found beneath that Turkish hillside: domesticated crops 1,000 years too early, metal processing 5 millennia before it should exist, engineering that rivals anything built for the next 6,000 years, doesn't just challenge the narrative, it demolishes it. And once you see the evidence, you'll understand why nothing we thought about Göbekli Tepe was ever right. Let me take you back to where this all started. In 1994, a German archaeologist named Klaus Schmidt is hiking across a barren hilltop in southeastern Turkey. The locals call it Potbelly Hill. Farmers have been pulling strange carved stones out of these fields for generations, tossing them aside as nuisances. Schmidt stops walking, he kneels down, he brushes dirt off a piece of limestone sticking out of the ground, and in that moment, he knows. He later told colleagues he felt physically sick, not from heat, but from the impossibility of what he was looking at. What Schmidt had found was the tip of a massive T-shaped pillar buried beneath the surface. Dating would eventually place it at 9,600 BCE. That's 6,000 years older than Stonehenge, 7,000 years before the pyramids. This thing was carved when humans supposedly lived in caves and hunted mammoths with stone-tipped spears. That date was impossible, but the stone was real. Here's the story we've been telling ourselves ever since. Hunter-gatherers in this region got really good at collecting wild grains and hunting gazelles. So good that they settled down, started gathering for religious rituals, and eventually built Gobekli Tepe as the world's first temple. Religion came before farming. The temple came before the village. It was an elegant theory that fit perfectly into our tidy narrative about human progress. But here's the deal. We should have known sooner that something was wrong. The warning signs were everywhere. We just ignored them because they didn't fit the story we wanted to tell. When excavations began in 1995, archaeologists uncovered massive circular structures with stone pillars carved with intricate animal reliefs, foxes with detailed fur texture, scorpions with segmented bodies, vultures in flight with anatomically correct wing structures.
This one just has to be my favorite. It's a leopard hunting one of those wild boars.
These pillars stood between 3 to 6 meters tall, weighing anywhere from 10 to 20 tons each. Not one or two of them, dozens. Arranged in precise circles, some nested inside others with engineering accuracy that made no sense for the supposed era. Think about that for a second. We're talking about people who allegedly hadn't invented farming yet. People living in small nomadic bands of maybe 20 to 50 individuals. People who supposedly couldn't organize anything larger than a hunting party. And they built this? The math never worked. To move a 20-ton stone just 1 kilometer, you need 200 to 500 people pulling in perfect coordination. You need someone to feed those people. You need leadership, planning, logistics. The entire region's population in 9,600 BCE was maybe a few thousand people total. Where did they find 500 laborers? How did they sustain them for the decades this construction required? The standard answer was religious motivation. Basically, they wanted it badly enough, so they figured it out. That's not an answer. That's a shrug dressed up as archaeology. But the construction logistics were just the beginning. What researchers found in 2019 should have blown the whole narrative apart, and somehow, it barely made headlines. Dr. Avi Gopher and Dr. Ran Barkai from Tel Aviv University conducted detailed 3D scans of the pillars using photogrammetry and laser technology. What they discovered was, in Dr. Gopher's words, deeply disturbing. The T-shaped pillars display geometric precision that shouldn't exist with Stone Age technology. The horizontal crossbars are carved with such uniformity that variation across multiple pillars, carved at different times, possibly by different crews over decades, is less than 2 centimeters. That's standardization, that's quality control, that's a measurement system. These are concepts we associate with civilizations that have writing, bureaucracy, and established craft guilds, not hunter-gatherers with stone hammers. And get this, there's no learning curve. The oldest structures at Göbekli Tepe, in Enclosure D, show the highest level of craftsmanship. Later enclosures, smaller pillars, cruder carvings, simpler techniques, that's backwards. Skills improve over time. Civilizations progress, they don't regress. Unless the people who built the earliest structures didn't develop those skills at Göbekli Tepe at all, unless they brought that knowledge from somewhere else. The 2019 findings should have rewritten the textbooks. Instead, the archaeological establishment did what establishments do. They adjusted the margins, tweaked the explanations, kept the core narrative intact. Then came 2025, and there was no more room for adjustments. Dr. Elena Konstantinidis from the University of Tübingen led an international team using electromagnetic conductivity mapping and advanced soil analysis to probe beneath the excavated areas.
For another 10 years, which is a rather rare case in archaeology nowadays.
They were looking for additional structures. What they found instead was infrastructure, channels, cisterns, an underground reservoir carved directly into the bedrock beneath the main enclosures, a water management system. Here's the catch. Water management requires hydraulic engineering knowledge, understanding of flow dynamics, gradient, calculations, long-term planning. These technologies don't appear overnight. They develop over generations of trial and error in settled communities with stable populations. The room where the team reviewed initial findings went quiet for nearly a minute. Dr. Michael Rosenberg, a Neolithic specialist consulting on the project, finally spoke. This changes the timeline. This changes everything. But the water channels were just the beginning. What they found in the DNA changed everything. The team extracted organic residues from sediment inside those newly discovered channels. Ancient DNA analysis revealed genetic material from cultivated grains. Specifically, early domesticated forms of einkorn wheat. The dating came back at 10,200 BCE. Domesticated wheat at Göbekli Tepe, more than 1,000 years before agriculture was supposed to have been invented. When Dr. Konstantinidis presented these findings to colleagues at the German Archaeological Institute, one senior researcher reportedly left the room mid-presentation. Another sat with his head in his hands. 30 years of published papers, 30 years of the confident documentaries, 30 years of religion before agriculture, all of it built on a foundation that had just crumbled. Think about what this means. The people who built Göbekli Tepe weren't pre-agricultural hunter-gatherers, taking their first stumbling steps towards civilization. They were already farmers. They already had permanent settlements, food surplus, and social organization. We weren't witnessing the birth of complexity. We were witnessing something that had already been complex for a very long time. And it gets worse. The 2025 study found evidence of metallurgical activity at the site. Copper slag, traces of high-temperature burning, small nodules of worked copper embedded deliberately in mortar between stones in Enclosure C, possibly offerings or markers. Chemical analysis matched the copper to ore deposits in the Ergani mines, about 50 kilometers north. To work copper, even crudely, you need temperatures above 1,000 degrees Celsius. You need specialized furnaces. You need knowledge of ore identification and processing. You need a society complex enough that metalworking specialization makes economic sense. This isn't a society at the beginning of anything. This is a society that's already sophisticated, already specialized, already operating with technologies we thought wouldn't exist for another 5,000 years. So, why have we been getting this wrong for 3 decades? Basically, we wanted a clean story. Göbekli Tepe fit perfectly as the spark that ignited civilization. So, we interpreted every piece of evidence to support that narrative. We ignored anomalies. We dismissed contradictions. We convinced ourselves that absence of evidence for agriculture was evidence of absence. It wasn't. We just weren't looking in the right places. Here's where the story turns dark. About 100 meters downslope, From the main enclosures lies the quarry where the pillars were cut. An unfinished pillar lies there, still attached to bedrock. This thing would have weighed 50 tons if completed, more than twice the size of anything successfully erected at the site. The old explanation? They got too ambitious and gave up. That never made sense. Why carve the entire shape before deciding it's too heavy? The 2025 team found the real answer. Chemical analysis of the rock face shows water damage and limestone dissolution, inconsistent with natural weathering. An underground water source, possibly related to their own water management system, flooded the quarry unexpectedly. Multiple unfinished pillars lie abandoned in various stages of completion. This wasn't a gradual decline, it was a catastrophe. The workers didn't choose to stop. They were forced to stop. And here's the haunting part. They never came back. Around 800 BCE, something even stranger happened. The entire site was deliberately buried. Not abandoned, buried. Someone organized the careful backfilling of every enclosure with dirt and rubble, preserving the structures beneath tons of sediment. Why build something magnificent just to bury it? The timing matches the 8.2 kilo-year event, a sudden climate catastrophe that devastated societies across the Near East. Temperatures dropped, rainfall patterns collapsed, civilizations died. Dr. Konstantinidis' team found the evidence in bones. Isotopic analysis of human remains shows dramatic dietary shifts in the final occupation layers. Nutritional stress, starvation signatures. Their sophisticated agricultural system was failing. Burying Göbekli Tepe may have been an act of desperation. Preserve the sacred center. I hope someone returns when conditions improve. No one ever did. The genetic analysis revealed the final devastating detail. DNA from human remains at Gobekli Tepe doesn't match later Neolithic populations in the region. There's a discontinuity. The people who built this place, who buried it, who starved in its final years, they're not the ancestors of anyone who came after. They vanished, died out, or fled so far that their descendants never returned. When new populations moved into the region centuries later, they had no memory of who built the ancient stone circles, no idea what they meant, no connection to the people who raised them. It's not that simple though. Gobekli Tepe isn't a lone anomaly. The 2025 study included comparative analysis of similar sites across southeastern Turkey and northern Syria, Karahan Tepe, Harbetsuvan, at least a dozen locations with T-shaped pillars and complex architecture. Pottery shards from Gobekli Tepe match clay sources 200 kilometers away. Obsidian tools came from eastern Anatolia. Animal bones include species from both mountain and lowland environments. This is trade. This is specialized production. This is a network spanning hundreds of kilometers. This is what civilizations do. What if Göbekli Tepe wasn't the beginning of civilization? What if it was a middle chapter, or an ending? The declining craftsmanship over time, the sophisticated infrastructure, early agriculture, the metal work, the trade networks, the genetic discontinuity, the catastrophic collapse. All of it points to a complex society that rose, flourished, and was erased before the civilizations we call first even began. A society working with knowledge accumulated over generations, building monumentally because they'd been building monumentally for longer than we ever imagined. Maybe earlier monuments are underwater, drowned by rising seas after the Ice Age. Maybe they're under desert sand. Maybe they were built from materials that didn't survive. Or maybe we just haven't recognized them for what they are. The story we've told for 30 years doesn't work anymore. Hunter-gatherers didn't spontaneously develop agricultural knowledge, hydraulic engineering, metallurgy, and architectural precision to build Gobekli Tepe from nothing. Something is missing, something big, and the 2025 discoveries prove it. Here's what keeps researchers up at night. We've excavated roughly 5% of Gobekli Tepe, just 5%. And that 5% already demolished everything we thought we knew. 95% remains buried beneath that Turkish hillside, waiting